just after 8 o'clock on the morning of April 21st, 1925. The White Star liner RMS Homeric was making her way through heavy seas only a couple hundred miles southeast of Halifax, when her chief wireless operator Tomlinson received an alarming distress call from a Japanese freighter called the Raifuku Maru. The ship was sinking fast. Tomlinson raced to alert Captain Roberts, who ordered the Homeric to alter her course and race for the sinking ship 70 miles away. As they sailed at her full speed of 20 knots, the messages from the Raifuku Maru became increasingly desperate, begging for help as their ship slowly succumbed to the punishing waves. Tomlinson sent reassuring messages, keeping them updated on their speed and position as they raced to aid their fellow mariners. The great passenger liner arrived just in time to watch the ship sink. Her final moments were caught on camera. Despite the presence of a large passenger liner, not a single one of the Raifuku Maru's 38 crew members were saved. The Homeric was never intended to make headlines. Following the loss of the Titanic, the White Star Line announced in 1913 that it had authorized the construction of a brand new 33,600-ton liner. The new ship, which was to be built by Harland and Wolff, would be one of the largest ships in the White Star fleet, though it would not rival the 46,000-ton Olympic, which was briefly once again the largest ship in the world. The new liner would be named Germanic, a name originally given to one of the liners that helped establish the modern White Star Line. While some speculate that the new ship was meant to replace the Titanic, she was actually intended for the secondary New York to Liverpool route. She was to be an updated and enlarged version of the wildly popular Adriatic, and would come in at 746 feet or 227.38 meters. Labeled hull number 470, her keel was laid down on July 9, 1914. Despite the Titanic tragedy, the White Star Line was still one of the largest and most powerful shipping companies in the world. New liners like the Germanic would reaffirm its status. But the world had other plans. Only weeks after workers began laying down the Germanic's keel, Great Britain went to war with Germany. Immediately, the name of the new liner was changed to Homeric for obvious reasons, but construction hesitantly continued until November, when it was finally halted to devote resources to the war effort. Only the ship's keel, center plate, and frame was completed up to her double bottom. This was all scrapped in May 1916 to clear the slipway to build warships. Work on the Homeric briefly began on another slipway, but this too was eventually cleared away for wartime production in September 1917. Even as the war came to a close in November 1918, the White Star Line maintained that the 33,600-ton liner would be forthcoming. But the war dramatically impacted the company's fleet and offered new opportunities. Two of its most important ships had been lost, RMS Oceanic and the third Olympic-class liner Britannic, which was meant to become the company's flagship after the war. While the phantom ship Homeric remained on the books, attention moved to the vast fleet of German liners allocated to the Allies as war reparations in the Treaty of Versailles. The White Star Line was offered a lifeline. Having suffered the greatest loss of any passenger shipping company, the massive Britannic, the company was able to acquire the largest ship in the world, sitting unfinished at the Blohm & Voss shipyard, the 56,500-ton Bismarck. The great liner would be renamed Majestic and join the Olympic on the White Star Line's premier express transatlantic route between New York and Southampton. But the White Star Line needed a third ship in order to offer a competitive weekly service. Fortunately, the Germans had another unfinished ship sitting at the F. Schischau shipyard in Danzig. Laid down in 1912 for Neudeutscher Lloyd and labeled hull number 891, the Columbus was intended for the company's Bremerhaven to New York service. Similar to White Star, Neudeutscher Lloyd prioritized comfort over speed. While the Columbus was designed to achieve only a modest 18-knot service speed, her accommodations would be some of the best of any liner sailing at the time. She was designed to offer as smooth of a ride as possible and remained remarkably stable even in heavy seas, a feature that would prove handy later in her career. Her upper deck was entirely devoted to her first-class public rooms, creating sweeping open light-filled spaces accented with fine woodwork, art, and furnishings. Large floor-to-ceiling windows bathed the rooms in daylight, making it easy to forget that you were at sea. Her twin screws were powered by reciprocating engines, the largest ship in the world with such a configuration at the time. She could accommodate 2,145 passengers, with 750 in first class, 545 in second, and 850 in third, with a crew of 780. Coming in at 34,351 tons with a length of 774 feet or 236 meters and a beam of 82.3 feet or 25.1 meters, the Columbus was remarkably similar to the proportions of the planned Homeric. Naturally, that would be her new name. While her hull was launched on December 17, 1913, she remained uncompleted at the shipyard for the duration of the war. After purchasing the new liner in 1920, officials from Harland and Wolff were sent to Germany to oversee the completion of her construction. Work moved slowly. Material and manpower shortages plagued war-torn Germany, and those they could find to work on the project were not exactly keen to finish a ship that would immediately go to their former enemy. Still, by the end of 1921, the Homeric was complete. She performed exceptionally well on her sea trials and finally arrived in Southampton on January 21, 1922. She departed for her maiden voyage on February 15th. While she was never intended to be an express liner, she joined RMS Olympic in serving White Star Line's express transatlantic route. The two were soon joined by the brand new RMS Majestic in May of that year, completing the hodgepodge trio. Meanwhile, the former Columbus's sister ship, originally to be named Hindenburg, was renamed Columbus and completed, entering service with Neudeutscher Lloyd in the summer of 1924. Homeric was an instant hit with passengers who loved her palatial accommodations and smooth handling. Perfect for those prone to seasickness. But her 18-knot service speed made it challenging to maintain a weekly schedule alongside the two larger and faster ships, each capable of easily exceeding 21 knots. In October 1923, the Homeric was pulled from service and underwent a major overhaul intended to eke out as much speed as possible. Her coal boilers were converted to oil burning, and after 18 months of work, she re-entered service on May 19, 1924, with an improved 19.5 knot service speed, enough to shave a day off her crossing time, but even this was too slow to match her fleetmates. As a result, Homeric, while always a passenger favorite, proved a constant headache for her owners. Despite being constantly overshadowed, she was a fine and capable liner. In August 1924, she sailed into a massive hurricane while heading for New York. Through the battering wind and waves, she held her own. Then, out of nowhere, the liner was hit by a massive wall of water. The rogue wave, estimated to be approximately 80 feet or 24 meters high, smashed open numerous windows and portholes, snapped chairs and fittings from her decks, and even carried away one of her lifeboats. 7 people were injured, and an Olympic gymnast, Rudolf Novak, traveling home from the Summer Games in Paris, was nearly swept overboard by the massive wave. Despite the superficial damage, the ship handled the beating well and carried on to New York. Battle-tested, her officers could be confident that the Homeric could weather almost anything the brutal North Atlantic could throw at her. This would be tested again, less than a year later. Raifuku Maru was unextraordinary. Built at the Kawasaki dockyard in Kobe, Japan in 1918, the Japanese freighter was a run-of-the-mill general cargo ship, one of 75 nearly identical ships of the Daiichi Daifuku Maru class of cargo ships, built between 1918 and 1921. Owned and operated by Kawasaki Kaizen Kaisha Limited, a company that still operates today, the modest freighter entered service in November 1918 and quickly went to work carrying various cargo all over the world. She came in at 5,867 tons, with a length of 385 feet or 117.3 meters and a beam of 36 feet or 11 meters. She was powered by a single triple expansion steam engine capable of achieving 14.5 knots. She was operated by a crew of 38. Simple but tough, the ship had been all over the world in her short career, and weathered her fair share of heavy seas. Before they departed, Captain Hakoda Ezeki knew that they would be in for a rough voyage. He had been with the company for 4 years. Before that, he spent several years serving Coast Guard duties in the Imperial Japanese Navy. He lived in Kobe, Japan with his wife and children, though like most sea captains, he spent a considerable portion of his life away at sea. He left Japan for the last time in September of the previous year. The weather forecasts that day were grim, but he trusted his ship and its crew. The Raifuku Maru departed Boston on April 18, 1925, carrying 7,200 tons of wheat, bound for Hamburg, Germany. Almost immediately, the dire weather reports came to fruition, as the freighter was soon battered by building winds and increasingly heavy seas. It was clear they had underestimated the strength of the gale. For 2 full days, the Raifuku Maru struggled forward, only barely making headway. All the while, the massive waves violently tossed the modest freighter in every direction. At some point, her cargo of wheat came loose. Wheat can act much like water when unsecured, dangerously shifting the ship's center of gravity. Soon she began to list just enough that her hatches and other openings became vulnerable to the punishing seas, opening up her cargo holds to an onslaught of water. When wheat gets wet, it will expand with enough force to pop rivets and even break open hull plating. Throughout the night of the 20th, her crew fought to save the ship, desperately pumping out water, but as the hours passed, her list grew more severe. By the early morning hours of April 21st, it was clear that the ship had passed the point of no return. Captain Ezeki summoned the ship's wireless operator, 29-year-old Masao Iwatari, and ordered him to send out a distress call. A native of Tokyo, Iwatari spent a great deal of time in New York for work, though his wife and young son still lived in Tokyo. Relatively new to the job, he graduated from the Meguro Wireless Telegraph Communication Training Institute only a few months before. This was no doubt a terrifying situation. But Iwatari acted heroically. He raced to the wireless cabin and immediately began sending out a desperate call for help. Approximately 70 miles away, RMS Homeric was fighting her way through the same storm. Significantly better equipped to handle the conditions, she was never in any real danger. Storms such as this one were exactly what the great Atlantic liners were built for. The sun had just come up, but the storm raged on. She was making good headway when at around 8 a.m., Chief Radio Operator Tomlinson heard Raifuku Maru's chilling distress call. SOS, Japanese steamship Raifuku Maru. Ship inclined 30 degrees. Load wheat helpless. Please, quick assist. The chilling message was immediately delivered to Captain John Roberts. He immediately altered the Homeric's course and raced at full speed for the sinking freighter. All the while, the 2 wireless operators exchanged messages. All other operators were ordered to stop transmitting, to keep the frequency clear. These were some of their messages. Due to the storm, neither the Homeric or the Raifuku Maru knew their exact location. Fortunately, the Homeric was equipped with directional wireless, which could be used to locate the source of the Raifuku Maru's wireless messages. The moment he received the calls for help, Captain Roberts ordered the Homeric pushed to her absolute limit. She raced forward at 20 knots, a full 2 knots faster than the ship was originally designed for. The situation on board was tense, as word spread among the 600 passengers that they had altered course on their voyage to New York. The splendid rooms creaked lightly as they gently rose and fell with the heavy seas. On most ships, it would be nearly impossible to even stand, but the Homeric remained remarkably stable as she rose and fell, pushing forward through the torrent. Her bridge was silent as Captain Roberts and his officers anxiously pushed the great liner to her limits to reach their fellow mariners. Down below, her engineering crew did everything they could to eke out every last bit of steam. In her galleys, chefs worked diligently to prepare for the coming lunch. For them, this was just another day. The Raifuku Maru's messages grew increasingly desperate. The signals proved crucial in guiding the Homeric to the scene. Finally, at around 12 o'clock, the sinking ship appeared on the horizon about 2 miles away. Visibility was terrible, with torrential rain, sleet, and constant spray whipped up by the 60-mile-per-hour winds. As they drew closer, they saw about half a dozen men clinging to her railing. The ship was listing nearly 60 degrees. She was far enough over that water was beginning to pour down her funnel. The ill-fated ship couldn't last much longer. Captain Roberts and his crew were now faced with the daunting task of mounting a rescue in some of the most challenging conditions imaginable. He pulled the Homeric alongside the Raifuku Maru's port bow. He could see men desperately clinging to the ship's railings. Broken bits of superstructure, life preservers, and other debris were swirling around the sinking ship, but he couldn't see anyone in the water. He ordered 3 lifeboats crewed and ready for lowering as he maneuvered the Homeric around to the leeward side of the sinking ship, closer to the men clinging to the railing. But in the 20 minutes that it took to get into position, one by one, the men on the Raifuku Maru dropped into the sea and quickly disappeared. When he was finished maneuvering his ship, Captain Roberts, now with a clear view of the ship's decks, scanned the scene. But now, he saw no one on the sinking ship or in the sea. He ordered oil pumped out to try and calm the water and give the victims a better chance. Seeing no one in the water or clinging to the ship, and recognizing the intense danger caused by the roiling sea, Captain Roberts decided not to lower the 3 small boats. He would not risk the lives of his crew. Now, all they could do was watch as the freighter began her final plunge. All of this played out in full view of the Homeric's 600 passengers. The scene must have been surreal. To pass from the splendid comfort of the Homeric's lounges, where despite some rolling, one could hardly imagine any real peril, out to her decks, where the pounding wind and rain roared, while another ship just a fraction of the great liner's size rolled over in the roiling sea. It was a horrible sight to behold as passengers lined her sheltered promenades and watched the awful scene unfold. Someone on board managed to capture these images as the Raifuku Maru lost her battle with the sea. They offer a sobering reminder of the power of the storm and the proximity of the ill-fated freighter. About 40 minutes after the Homeric arrived on the scene, the Raifuku Maru finally turned over and slipped beneath the waves. Just before her final plunge, another ship, the King Alexander, arrived on the scene, but they were too late to mount any rescue. The 2 ships remained on the scene for some time, searching the water for survivors. But finding none, the Homeric soon abandoned their efforts and resumed their voyage to New York. Not a single one of the 38 men aboard the Raifuku Maru were saved. RMS Homeric arrived in New York late on the evening of April 22nd, 1925. Her passengers were eager to share what they witnessed, but their accounts couldn't be more different. While 123 passengers signed a letter praising Captain Roberts and his crew, affirming that he did everything he could to try and rescue the imperiled sailors, others were far more critical. One first-class passenger, Amos Ari Pinchot, a brother of Pennsylvania Governor Gifford Pinchot, directly contradicted Captain Roberts' claim that there was no one in the water that they could save. His account of the tragedy was recorded in the New York Times. The captain's statement was extremely inaccurate when he said that there was no life in the water after the Japanese freighter capsized. I personally saw several men in the water, either swimming or being carried by the current toward the Homeric. I lost trace of them in the high waves as they drifted toward the stern of our ship. We steamed off almost immediately after the steamer capsized, and a great many of the passengers expressed anger and regret that the Homeric did not stand by a few minutes longer. Pinchot described the moment they arrived on the scene in more detail. We could see men climbing over the side of the Japanese ship. Some were swept overboard, others tried to cling to the bottom of the overturned. We could see them with our naked eyes. People who had glasses could see them very plainly as they were clinging to the rail. Others, many others, drifted down to within 150 to 200 yards of the stern of our ship. There were 3 or 4 in one group, but they gradually dropped out of sight. While he agreed that it was probably too dangerous to launch any lifeboats, Pinchot also questioned why the crew didn't even try to throw out any flotation devices, or one of the ship's rafts. Several others corroborated Pinchot's claims. Another first-class passenger, Colonel Paul E. Alberti, a marine insurance underwriter, gave a similarly critical account. I saw one man in the water. We had come alongside the Japanese ship about 11:50 a.m. when we were closest. We protected her from the wind and from the heavy seas. There was a fairly smooth sea between us and the Japanese ship. I was standing on the stern deck. Many other passengers were out on deck watching the tragic spectacle. Most of the passengers were on A deck. We could see the poor devils all having life preservers on and waiting to be rescued. We did not shoot any lines to them, as I hoped they would. I understand the Homeric did not have any equipment for shooting lines. If any rafts had been let loose on lines, which could have been done without risking or sacrificing one man of the Homeric's crew, since the sea was too rough for boats, the sea would have carried the rafts toward the sinking boat. No heroic effort was made to rescue those men. They went on to claim that some passengers even volunteered to try and swim to the sinking ship, but they were stopped by the crew. Still, just as many passengers who witnessed the same tragedy backed up the official account of what happened and claimed Captain Roberts did everything he could. Recognizing the danger, many noted that no one could have survived in the rough seas for long, and the lifeboats would likely swamp in minutes, imperiling the crew. Soon after these conflicting reports were published, several captains who sailed through the same storm put out statements backing up Captain Roberts' actions that day, affirming that it would have been almost impossible to rescue the men given the conditions. A statement was signed by nearly all of the Homeric's crew, 574 people, affirming that Captain Roberts performed his duty admirably and did everything he could without endangering the lives of his crew and his passengers. The story made headlines throughout the world. In Japan, the press was considerably more critical of the Homeric, claiming that bias played a role in the decision not to launch lifeboats, though the Raifuku Maru's parent company issued a statement thanking the White Star Line for their efforts to try and save the men. The controversy helped bring attention to the tragedy and prompted the Japanese emperor to personally donate 300 yen each to the families of the victims. But soon, the story faded from memory. It became just a footnote in the Homeric's short career. When the White Star Line merged with Cunard, she found herself on the chopping block and was sold for scrap in 1936. The Raifuku Maru briefly gained prominence once again in 1974 when it was falsely claimed that she had vanished in the Bermuda Triangle in a wildly popular book on the subject. This was obviously ridiculous and easy to debunk. The ship and her crew soon faded from memory once again. Today, it's hard to find any information on them at all. But in the immediate aftermath of the sinking, the ship's agent left the following words about Captain Hakoda Izeki. I believe he loved his crew more than his own family. He was a rather strict and particular gentleman. Stern disciplinarian, but every one of his men, from officers down, worshipped him. It's easy to forget with tragedies like this one that 38 people's lives ended that day. While we don't know them all, they each had a story, plans for the next day, and what they would do after the voyage, hopes and dreams for the future. But all of that ended. One can only imagine the relief they must have felt when they saw the brilliant lights of the Homeric emerge from the storm, and the crushing defeat when they realized that no one was going to save them. Thank you so much for watching. If you appreciated this video, help out the channel with a like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. Make sure to hit the bell to get notified when a new video comes out. I'd like to give a special shout out to my supporters on Patreon and my channel members. Their support helps keep the channel afloat. Alright crew, that's all I've got. Until the next one, be nice to people.